let's watch this video about PirateSoftware and the garbage going on. I mean, how bad he is. And also, please go to the description and click on the original video and give that guy a like and a sub. It will help him out because it does actually help the other channels people watch. And that's the right thing for me to do and everyone else.
All right, let's start diving into the DRM analysis for PirateSoftware's two games, Champions of Breakfast and Heartbound. Let's start with some information about the two games and clear up some misinfo too. Both Champions of Breakfast and Heartbound were created in the GameMaker engine. Champions of Breakfast is the game Jason claims has the unpiratable DRM.
I tried to find a way so that our game wouldn't get pirated because it'd be easy to pirate it. This is your save file. First start the game up, it actually checks what achievements you have and it unlocks powers based on your achievements. This is actually the save file for the character, so you can't pirate it because you can never use the achievements. It made it unpiratable, which is deeply hilarious.
So, as you saw, essentially the DRM for Champions of Breakfast is the Steam achievements acting as a quasi-save file. The Heartbound DRM is the following code snippet that Jason has shown live on stream multiple
I wonder how good he actually is because that might be trash, what I've been hearing.
times. Now, recently, a lot of people have been posting that Heartbound has always online DRM. That is false. Heartbound does not have always online DRM. The DRM approach does not require online connectivity to function. It'll work just fine with Steam in offline mode. Jason has told the truth in regards to this matter, so he doesn't deserve the online DRM hate he's getting currently. Second, the Steam achievements acting as a save file is only in Champions of Breakfast. Heartbound does not have any dependence on Steam achievements. These are two completely separate DRM solutions. Now, let's start analyzing the Heartbound DRM code. The important variable we need to pay attention to within the code is on line 3, the global.pirated game variable that is set to 1. Like the variable name suggests, this is what dictates whether or not the game is considered pirated within the game itself. A value of 1 implies the variable.
And the funny thing is, he calls himself PirateSoftware. He doesn't believe in stop killing games, so if we don't own the game, that means pirating is not illegal. We can't own the games. I mean, back in the day, you owned the game. You actually own the physical game, so pirating was illegal. But today's standards, is it illegal if we don't own the game? No, it's technically not because we're just renting it. Like if you make copies of a disc.
Variable has a truthy value. Normally for this type of thing, we'd use a boolean and use true and false as the variable values directly, but we'll leave that aside for now and touch on
And please don't do that stuff.
again in the code review section. If we continue and move on to line 5, we can see the DRM process goes as follows. First, we check to see if Steam is initialized. Once if it's confirmed to be true, the game is considered legitimate, hence line 7. Then at line 13, we check to see if the Steam client is actually a Steam emulation or crack. The double equal sign means we're checking to see if the value of this function is equal to the ASCII string IGG Games. IGG Games is an unsafe piracy group, and they use their name when they package their cracked Steam games. Then we set the game to pirated on line 14 if we confirm it's an IGG Games crack copy of the game. Now, we move on to line 16 where we check to see if there's a bogus account ID. We also on line.
You know how long this would take just to wipe out? I could go in here. I have all the programs, technically. I could probably go in this program myself. If I don't have it, I could download it from an actual legit source and remove this IGG game. So technically, if I would use it, I'd remove that code. It will never check for it. Or I could go in here. It wouldn't take me that long once I know where to look and delete that part or redo it. And I don't even know coding. I'm not coding Jesus. I don't know what I'm doing. I know to a point. I understand to a point. I haven't even went to college, God sakes, and I could read kind of, and I could change this code. Oh, I don't want certain parts. So as soon as I understand what it is, wipe it out, and magically it was never there, and all suddenly I don't have to worry about it. That's the thing is.
19, check to see if we have a known Steam app ID that is commonly used in cracks or playing pirated games or mods. If either one of these checks end up being true, we also set the pirated game variable to true. Now, in order for us to break this DRM, the first two problems we have to deal with is the function call of Steam initialized and the Steam DRM that would be included with the actual game. Steam DRM is Steam's own added-on DRM. It is completely separate from the Heartbound DRM we're discussing. Due to legal reasons, I'm not going to directly show what programs to use or how to bypass Steam functions in Steam DRM, but I'll explain a bit about the process and how secure using Steam functions.
Basically, he doesn't want his video to be deleted or that, and recommend not looking it up. But people are going to do what they want. They'll even look up stuff they shouldn't be looking up, like Iran.
as a form of DRM is. First, let's talk about the Steam DRM. The Steam DRM has been well understood by cracking groups for a very long time. It's so well understood and commonly cracked, there are multiple tool sets built for it and guides, to the point even non-technical users can use them to crack and distribute their own Steam games. This is called home riffs, and this is one of the reasons there's so many Steam games that have day one cracks floating around. Next, we have the Steam functions.
Yeah, day one cracks. No time it will be out there for free. Pirates happen all the time.
That we saw in the Heartbound DRM code that we need to address for the Champions of Breakfast DRM. For this issue, let's talk about Steam client emulators. These are programs that mimic some legitimate Steam client functions and fake some of the other functionality you expect in the legitimate Steam client. There are numerous Steam client emulators, and I'm not going to touch any of these emulators, but take my word for it that they can easily get through the Steam DRM and the initialized function check. And they can also mimic the Steam Achievement API, meaning not
By just telling that, people are going to try to find out.
only can the Steam DRM be bypassed by using these emulators, but they would also allow you to crack and play Champions of Breakfast, plus you'd basically have a save game editor along with the two.
I also don't recommend, if you ever download this stuff, on your primary computer. There could be a virus. Like, take your credit card number for free.
While we're on the topic of Champions of Breakfast, I was curious how
Always put it on a basic computer program which allows you to mirror your computer, but not keep it on your computer.
long it took for the game with the unpiratable DRM to be cracked after it was released, and this is what I found. 1 day and 17 hours after the game was released on Steam, there was already a home rip floating around. If
You know what that 1 day and 17 hours is? 1 day just to get it out. 17 hours, and that includes download. They had to download the game, crack it, and then send it to what they have to do, and then it was out. They probably took an hour to have this game cracked. Literally 1 hour or 10 minutes to crack it, and uploading. That's basically all it was.
you don't consider home rips to be valid, I also checked to see if any known Where's scene groups had a crack for the game. The scene group Simplex has also had a crack for the game floating around for years at this point, so that unpiratable DRM has been soundly defeated multiple times just after launch. Now, with those problems addressed, let's return to the Heartbound DRM code and examine the last problem.
And again, go to the description and click on his video.
We need to figure out how to break.
It'll be the first click.
Namely, the IGG games check and the various ID checks setting the pirated game variable to true. In order to break this, we'll need to do some reverse engineering. To make this reverse engineering and cracking process smoother to explain, I've copied over this snippet of code into a tiny C++ program. The DRM I have in it is in the left pane between lines 13 to 51. Now, you might notice I have a couple functions here between lines 15 to 33. Those are just placeholders. Due to legal reasons, I'm not including the real Steam SDK or functions in my tiny program, or including it within the actual reverse engineering process. Since I already explained how they can be defeated, it's not important to include them in the program. Back to our code, you can see the rest of the DRM matches up basically one-to-one with the DRM snippet we have from Heartbound. Last line to note, I run the DRM check here on line 108 just after the program starts. The rest of my program code doesn't matter
He knows more than PirateSoftware knows. Literally.
too much. I'm basically just using the Windows native Win32 API to create a simple window that will have a red background if the game is pirated, and if it's a legitimate copy, the background will be green. Also, just like the Heartbound DRM code, we start the program assuming to be in a pirated state. Now, I compiled the little app we have, and we have an exe we can run. Let's pretend we don't have the actual source code and just have the exe. So, how do we modify the exe and beat the DRM? In order to modify the exe, we'll need to use what is known as a disassembler plus a debugger. I'll be using OllyDebug, which is a very old and outdated x86 debugger. If someone was doing actual reverse engineering these days, the tools they would look for and use would probably be something like EDA Pro or Ghidra, a reverse engineering tool built by the NSA and freely available.
Yeah, it costs quite a bit, but when you're a hacking group, that's cheap.
On GitHub to download and use. Anyways, let's open up OllyDebug and attach a little DRM test application and see what we get. So here in the main window, we have something that is called assembly. This is normally the lowest low-level programming language used and is very tightly corresponds to machine code. And these are the instructions your computer or phone CPU is actually executing when you're using a program. The other window panes don't matter at all for our purposes, so we can ignore them. Next, I'm going to run this program as just a simple smoke test to make sure everything's working as we expect it to. Namely, we see the red background and the pirate game detected stuff we expect from our DM. I don't need the live 5 attached process info, so it'll close the app and return to the view we had originally when we opened the exe. Now, remember earlier how I mentioned IGG Games was an ASCII string? Well, that's what we're going to search for. Since the string isn't obfuscated and will be in plain text, we can easily search for it and hunt it down. Alright, I see 2 IGG game strings in our search. Let's just go and open the first one and see what code is there. The first function looks similar to our stub function in our C++ code. The second IGG game strings is just a bit beneath, so let's look at that. Now we see something interesting, notably the D word pointer and the line ending with 0. If we look just a few more lines below, we see more D word pointer lines, except these ones end with 1. I hope everyone is catching on and you realize these are the lines of our original C++ source code setting the pirated game variable. Now, since we already know this is the DRM function, what happens if we change the values in those lines below to 0? With all that changed, let's try running our little application again, and we've successfully cracked the DRM, since now the
That didn't take long. Literally, this guy probably spent 30 minutes to an hour or less. Maybe 10 minutes to do it or less. And he already has a cracked game.
the pirated game variable at every point in a program code will always report back false. Now, I'm sure many of you watching have questions and concerns. Stuff like, what if Pirate never shared the DRM code? You wouldn't be able to do this so easily and quickly. Or maybe something like, your app was made
He never shared it.
in C++. Heartbound is made in GameMaker, so the output files and structure would be different. First, let's pretend we didn't know what the DRM code looked like and we're doing a real blind reverse engineering attempt
Oh yeah, he did show it.
at cracking the DRM. Let's go through this scenario. Let's assume we already have the original game files. Now we open the game, and let's say we're using one of those Steam client emulators I mentioned from earlier in the video. Let's say we're playing through Heartbound and trying to find information to use to actually crack it. Well, we're in luck. Since Heartbound has a piracy message, if you somehow manage to pull this exact scenario I'm describing, here's a screenshot from a user that owns a legitimate copy of the game, and they managed to trigger this pirate message on their Steam Deck, meaning 2 things. 1, the DRM is so bad it has false positive activations, which I find funny, and 2, we have our unique identifier mostly unobfuscated ASCII string to search for in our debugger. The pirate message string is unique enough that we can use it to hunt down the DRM code within the debugger. The reason being, in order for the message to appear, it has to either be checking the pirated game variable or is close to the DRM check function, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to be triggered. In either case, we have enough info from this alone to hunt down the DRM and break it, even if we didn't have the original DRM code snippet for reference. Now, let's talk about the C++ versus GameMaker issue. GameMaker is a game engine, and it has its own process of packaging up a game built together and will include much more files than just a single exe. You might think this would make the cracking process more difficult, but the exact opposite is actually true. The reason is GameMaker builds are something that is well understood, and there are lots of decompilation tools. You might remember me using the term compilation earlier in the video, so let me explain these two terms a bit more clearly now. When you have, for example, our C++ source code and you're trying to turn it into an executable the computer can run, this is called compilation. The process of turning code
Basically, you have to do a bunch of different things, like you turn C++ what he's showing to become that.
into instructions the computer can actually understand and can execute. Decompilation is the process in reverse. You have some kind of application and you're trying to convert it back into what the original source code looked like, meaning you can use a decomp tool on the GameMaker
Actually, this is going to be good for me to learn later.
build and get back GameMaker language code that it looks somewhat close to the original source code, which also means you'd have an easier time hunting down the DRM code since it's easier to reason about in a GameMaker language than it is in raw assembly. So the C++ reverse engineering example I demonstrated is actually harder and more worst case scenario, relatively speaking, to trying and figure out the crack. Now, to the last question everyone might have, what if that pirated game variable didn't exist and you couldn't change the value to 0? Well, nothing changes even if that was the case. Why? Well, the DRM is so stupidly simple and there isn't any application.
Oh yeah, game companies treat devs like trash. If you're interested in becoming a dev, expect long hours, sleeping at work, and the boss saying, "I can do everything." Actually, he doesn't even know how to play a game or even know dev work, but you're doing all the back-breaking work and while he's making all the money.
Application security measures to prevent reverse engineering or tampering with it. We could have just ripped out the entire DRM function and left it empty. We could have found the places the DRM checks were called and removed them instead. Regardless of what we chose, there's at least a few dozen working options to pick from. And all of this also applies to the actual Heartbound game, not just to the tiny C++ program I wrote. To be thorough, I'll also cover some application security measures that could be added and some DRM measures. But I'll keep it light and just at a high level overview, since diving into those is way too out of scope for this video. First of all, let's go back to our C++ source code. Something we could add to prevent Ollie debug from opening up our exe would be to add the native Win32 function isDebugger present. Yes, that one line would help stop some of the simplest debuggers from opening the exe. Next, we could also add something called string obfuscation, meaning we don't need stuff like IGG Games or the YAR pirate message and easy to search for format. By obfuscating and having a special function to decode the real strings, we could have prevented the search string stuff we did in the cracking process.
So basically, I don't
Another simple
realize.
thing we could do is what's called a checksum. Basically, we can have our own application look at part of itself and generate a special
Oh, check, and check.
result from that. So in the case if someone tried to crack the application by removing the DRM, the application portion being checked would be different, meaning the checksum generated now would be different from what's expected and as a result would fail. These are fairly common additional layers of defense for programs to help prevent tampering with the distributed program by end users. Alright, with all that, I think we can start wrapping up this DRM analysis. And yes, there's a million more things that could have been done, and yes, there's a ton more application security measures that could be added. There's entire standard bodies around it. I just barely scratched the surface. Also, I'm not a hacker. I don't do this type of work professionally, and I don't mess around with this stuff in my free time either. I'm a complete novice when it comes to this area. But for context, if I didn't stop this video every few seconds to explain what was going on, the first attempt I took at cracking the DRM in total, uninterrupted, would have been 37 seconds altogether. Now, let's return to Jason and see a tweet plus a short where he mentions his assembly and reverse engineering experience.
I'm a hacker. I've been a hacker for 20 years. Part of my job throughout that was
He making rookie mistakes all the time.
working in the games industry. I was one of the guys sitting there pulling down every bot that worked for every MMO that we worked on, everything at Blizzard, grabbed every single one of those, pulled it out into assembly, grabbed the code key from it, removed the polymorphic.
The section is pretty long, so we'll save
Yeah, that's really funny, Pirate.
breaking down the code cave and polymorphic code comments and nonsense, and his comments to VX Underground for maybe a part 3 video related to his hacking claims. The only part from here we need to care about for now is Jason has confirmed to have done reverse engineering and gone through and read assembly, similar to what we did earlier. That was another reason I chose to use C++ and Nolly debug, since those would have been the language and tool he would have been using during his time period at Blizzard or earlier, since those were some common choices back.
Yeah, that means he doesn't know anything. He's like a newbie trying to make a game.
Back then. Now, while in part 1, I leaned towards distrust, but I gave him the benefit of doubt on a few of his hacking points, I think it's clear to see Jason doesn't seem to know a whole lot on how to create a secure application or how to set up a real custom DRM solution. And while this entire video I've been referring to all this as DRM, it really doesn't deserve to be called as such. I can fairly confidently say Jason barely has any application hacking knowledge that you would expect someone to have with his supposed history and experience. So the fact he doesn't even seem
He should be able to do better DRM like it was nothing. The code should be foolproof with the amount of knowledge he has. People who hack government security know how to hack. He doesn't even know the basics.
seem to understand any of these concepts or problems makes
I heard he doesn't even know how to hack other companies. He just sends phishing emails, which anyone can do. That's where you send an email to a company and say, I am the king of England or a big sultan. I'll pay you X amount of money. Can you, I'll hire you. And then get their information and then take all their information. Any rookie can do that, even I could.
me fairly confident saying his reverse engineering and assembly claims are mostly
And even ChatGPT, which they're starting to use.
made up stories or complete and outright lies. Let's leave the DRM stuff behind us now and move towards the code reviews. Before I start doing the reviews themselves, let me give some additional context. If you watched part 1, you would know Jason supposedly started doing dev stuff in 2002, meaning at this point in 2025, he has 23 years of experience programming. When he started working on his first game, Champions of Breakfast, he had somewhere around 13 years
This is part 2?
of experience. So when he started seriously working on Heartbound, he should have been very familiar with GameMaker and the GameMaker language. Also, he's the owner of the game studio and the only
Oh, I didn't even look down there.
person who's ever touched the code on the Heartbound game. So I don't want to hear any nonsense like his code's bad on purpose for job security or someone else wrote the garbage code and he inherited and has to maintain it. Lastly, all the code we're going to look at is modern and should still be in the game based on what I could find from his live streams. So this is a reflection of his current abilities. I'll be saving all my comments related to Jason's coding abilities for after I finish all the code reviews. Also, let me break down my criteria and rules I set for myself so everyone understands why I chose these code snippets and how I'll be offering advice and comments on them. First off, the code snippet had to be something I had confirmed to be shown on Jason's streams. I had a ton of people sending me code snippets in text over the last few days, so while it might be Jason's code, if I couldn't confirm it, I decided to skip it for the sake of fairness. So every code snippet we'll review today is something I can personally verify has been shown on one of his streams and is legitimate Heartbound code. Second off, the code needs to be a reoccurring problem or have significant impact on a large part of the code base, so I won't be reviewing some throwaway script on some small unimportant object, like some random tree object that has an attached script. This I think is kind of pointless to review, so I skip those kind of super low hanging fruits. Thirdly, unless I absolutely have to, I won't drastically change the code. I'll offer solutions and improvement paths that can be taken to make the current code reach some junior level baseline of quality. Also, I'll limit my advice to things that are possible in the GameMaker language and engine. So design patterns and practices that are possible in other engines or languages, but not easily doable or possible in GameMaker, I'll be skipping. Fourth, I largely won't be talking about performance. We're just trying to get the code to something readable that a real development team could realistically understand and work on. Having performance discussion and talking about entirely different data structures.
Basically, do you get enough frame rates and that and performance, or does it lag and glitch out? Basics.
Structures and game design patterns is too far removed from the topics of this video. Plus, the Heartbound game is extremely simple, so additional improvements here won't truly matter.
What I've seen, it looks like a Super Nintendo or even NES game. It doesn't take a whole lot of power to run it. Your cell phone should be able to run it with ease, and I mean the cheap ones.
Fifth, if I basically covered all the issues another code snippet would have, I won't cover the other similar snippets. Basically, there are like
the NES won't be able to if you put it all on original hardware. Maybe if you put it into a game and shove it in with all the memory you want, you might be able to.
100 files with the exact same problems and issues, so if I address the issues other code snippets would have during the other snippet reviews, I'll skip over anything too similar so this video isn't stupidly long and repetitive. Yes, there's that many problems with the code base. I felt I needed to add these rules and criteria.
That's bad.
Yeah, with all that out of the way, let's start with some actual code reviews. We'll bring back the DRM snippet and we'll open up a few other snippets as well. If you remember at the start of the video, I talked about truthy and falsy values on the pirated game.
And go to the description to click on his video and give him a subscribe, because oh my god, this is really good information if you guys skipped around that in the video.
Variable. And I brought up the term booleans. Booleans are basic data
also subscribe to me too.
Type in nearly all programming languages, and you would use the values of true and false directly when you're checking to see if a variable is, well, true or false. So if we look at these code snippets, we can see Jason is using 0 or 1 in numerous places, instead of using the appropriate data types and values. This is a sign of a more amateur programmer. I just wanted to clear this up now.
Yeah, it means he's making rookie mistakes. If he was a Blizzard employee for all these years, it shouldn't even be a second thought. It's like martial arts. Once you learn something, it's very hard to unlearn it. Basics. When I did 21 movement, I did half of it without even thinking. It wasn't even a thought process. It was like, I do this move, my body just moves on its own without me thinking. For a coder, that's like doing 20 years of that, you don't forget. Jobs I did back in the day, I can do without thought because it becomes you. So him doing this means he never did it. It means he's looking up the internet how to do it.
So we won't have to repeat this in every single code snippet we look at. Now, let's drill down into a specific code snippet. We'll start with the one from the bottom left. Alright, so the very first line, we already have a lot of issues here. So Jason is accessing a storyline flag in a single dimensional global array using a raw index number of 367. Both of those things are terrible, but let me explain what an array is first. Arrays are a basic data structure that stores a collection of elements. Let's go through a quick example. Imagine you have a row of boxes.
There was a guy who made a game for the Commodore more recently, and he did a way better. I mean, he was making it for the Commodore 64, and literally he was limited to the processing everything of the original hardware. If this guy tries to do it, the game will be 1,000 times bigger and bad than if PirateSoftware made a game for the Commodore 64, it would never work. This guy who's making the video knows what he's doing.
And inside each box you add a number. To access a number inside a specific box, you would use what's called an index value. In GameMaker, array indexes start at 0. Another nice thing with arrays, there are lots of functions built into your programming language, making it much nicer to work with. Arrays are a basic program concept and near universal in all languages. Now, let's deal with the index number 367. This is what we call a magic number. Magic numbers in programming are when you use a number directly to check or access something, and there's no way for someone
if you wonder, he's up here by the 63.
Reading it to have any idea what it could
magic numbers, no need.
Possibly mean or refer to without someone else explaining the intent or finding a different file that might hold the context needed. Jason uses magic numbers across all his files in codebase. So for us to get context on this, let's pull up another code snippet.
Basically, magic numbers can be debunked by people who actually know what the code really means.
that has the storyline, array comments, and logic.
Let's say you and me try to do it. It's magical numbers. It's Wizard of the Odds. Now us will say, the coder guy will say, this is pure hot garbage.
Okay, there's another huge issue with this code snippet too. Something I'll refer to as code change blast radius. To better understand what blast radius is, let's imagine we're looking at lines with indexes of 207 and 208 dealing with something called middle storyline flags. Let's say one day we want to add another storyline flag or event for the section called middle. We have two options here. Option 1, we go to the end of this array and add in a completely unrelated area of the array another middle event. So this array has something like 560 indexes, meaning if we added a new one at the end, our middle event flag.
And the funny thing is, if he was truly gone to be a Blizzard, he would have to go through all this knowledge, gone to college, and this is beginner knowledge. I mean, if you go to college as is, to graduate, you have to know what you're doing. And then not mentioning, there is a test you more likely have to do just to get in a Blizzard. And if you can't pass it, I heard of a plant where you had to do certain things, a basic test. If you couldn't do it, you couldn't get in. No matter how good your resume was, if you couldn't do the job, they wouldn't hire you. It's not like you go to McDonald's and get a job. If you can't pass the test, you're worthless. And he's proving, and out of doubt, he's completely garbage.
Flags would be indexes 207, 200.
And yeah, his dad is the so-called up there. Doesn't matter. If his dad is a developer, he still has to pass the test. And if his dad is a developer, why is he making so many dang mistakes?
508 and 561. This is absolutely terrible since logic and events that should be together are at completely random spots inside the array. This causes a whole host of issues. The code becomes difficult to reason about, the magic numbers become even more challenging to maintain and use. It's so obtuse that the odds of maintaining and using this code decreases the more this array is expanded on. So what's option 2? Well, it would be nicer if it was at line 209. So it's logic grouped together, but in order to do that, we need to bump all the under indexes by 1. So the old 209 would be 210, old 210 would be 211, etc. Unfortunately, this is what we call a nightmare code change or refactor scenario.
Basically, have fun. You're going to spend hours on hours on hours changing all of it. That's why this coding is bad. That's why a bunch of companies, what they do is have more gaps in it, especially when you're developing the game. Instead of 213, and then that following one's going to be 214, it's going to be 200 from like 212, and then there'll be a gap probably of 10 numbers. So if something has to change or something, it'll be a nice big gap, so you got chances to go in there and fix it. This is like, you're going to have to rewrite the whole program. You're going to have to rewrite all of this. This could take several hours.
Since if we wanted to do that, we would have to go by hand and update every single index after 209 within this file. Then we'd have a near 100% code change blast radius. Since if we change those indexes, every other file using those storylines,
yeah, every other file that you were using now has to be changed. Like the 304 has to be changed to go down one. Everything below this code, like if you change number 13 or 213 to 214, now every single one is now messed up. Have fun. You're looking at days of worth of work just because of one digit.
flags is going to need to update their index number by 1 if they're at the 209th index or greater. Essentially, the structure is so bad and unwieldy, it's basically impossible to maintain or extend in a good way as it is. Let's deal with the magic numbers first.
And also, for people who maybe skipped around, I don't know anything about coding. I know a little bit, but I know to a point. I know the basics. More likely as much as PirateSoftware. And I can't code a game. I know Java a little bit. And technically, if you want to learn coding, you don't have to spend anything. You just have to buy a computer and get the right program from a cell phone, and you can learn coding yourself. Just don't be a dev. Make your own game and make money that way.
First,
and also work a regular job.
Then we'll discuss
or become a YouTuber after you learn how to code. Just don't go to a corporation. They will treat you like a sack of meat or fire your ass in 3 weeks because magically they're shrinking.
Better way to do the story flags. We have two,
and they're giving everything to the CEO.
Two options when it comes to the magic index numbers. We can use const values or enums. Const values are just a named variable with a value that will never change. Enums are a data type that contains its own list of named constants. Enums are a much nicer choice to work with, so we'll go with them. With this enum defined,
And if you think, oh, there won't be enough devs, they're dying for a dose now. Because too many people went into devs.
we can update the global storyline array where index 207 and 208 are with the enum values. Now, isn't this better? Now we have some context for what
Yeah, there's a nice gap.
the storyline array indexes 4. Plus, if we return to our previous code snippet, we could change all of these magic numbers into enum values. So 367 could be an enum forest value, 333 could be an enum value for a town, and the 1 and 2 that is Fern and Road could also use a character enum. Now we have our first code improvement. The storyline flag structure still isn't good, but we've reduced the blast radius of changes from the entire codebase to basically just one file. Since we have a nice abstraction,
Basically, instead of changing 700 codes or more, you only have to change 2 pieces of code. Basically, not go from a nightmare to simple work.
away from the raw index number, we just need to update the enum and the storyline array to have new flag options without having to update the rest of the code.
And yes, if you want to learn how to do Java, you can learn it too. I know the basic. I can go in there and change a few files I want.
Base. This also helps with something called developer experience, DX for short. GameMaker includes what we call an IDE
Even my friend who barely knows how to read can do more coding.
or integrated development environment. Basically, an IDE helps you to code and easily refer to code and values across your codebase. So if we use, let's say, the enum example, and we start typing in middle and then dot, the IDE would show us the values under the middle enum, meaning we don't have to search for the file with the enum to see what values we can use under that specific enum. We also don't get a bunch of random type suggestions that don't apply to this situation. Having good DX is important when working in a team, and I'd argue critical if you're trying to build and program something solo in a reasonable amount of time. So we'll stop worrying about the snippets since it's half decent code quality now and workable. Now, let's return to the global storyline array. While our enum change is a huge improvement over the original state of this file, this still isn't exactly good. Now, before I offer a solution, let's see why Jason used the flat single dimensional array in the first place. So, according to Jason, he has a flat array because he wants all the values to be saved exactly the same way in the game's save file so players can modify it. Well, his reasoning is kind of dumb. What kind of code structure you have?
Or he does not want no one to modify it and be rammed the head against concrete.
And the save file format you want do not impact each other. Every single game that has a save file has something called serialization, which is the process of taking your game structure and data and converting it into a format your game will know how to read and reassign the values into the correct places. This is serialization and deserialization respectively, and it's a basic concept when making a save file. This is literally a basic thing nearly every single game has. So yes, it's perfectly safe to not use the one-dimensional array here. Next, let's look at a save file. So every line has a random number value that's supposed to correspond to one of his array indexes. Since we know what the
And tell you the truth, when I was looking at Java, I never seen this yet. And I was tearing apart code just for the fun and the giggles trying to figure it out.
problem is and what we need to achieve, now let's actually code up a
The other code, I have seen that similar to that in Java
better solution.
when I was going through a mod.
Let's start by changing the storyline array into a struct. A struct is a composite data type. Basically, it's just a variable that can hold other variables inside itself. Since we already know Heartbound has 5 chapters, I'll further split up the structs for the 5 chapters to have some separation of concerns. Here we can see what the structs look like. We have at the top level our
He's rewriting the game so it actually to be decent. He's making the game actually run better.
chapter, then we have our area of that chapter, and finally within the 3rd level we have our storyline event. What's so nice with this approach
This is probably going to take less power because of him.
is we can now ditch the enums entirely. We can access the storyline flags like this, for example, chapter 1, dot, middle, dot, Joe sunglasses. Not only is this incredibly clear on what value we're trying to access, but now we also have nearly no code change blast radius if we want to modify a flag or add a new one.
Basically, he can have multiple glasses there, multiple Joes or Katie's or Jesse's or anything. And it wouldn't be a change more than 2 seconds of typing.
Setup also makes it safer if we're working in a team, since now if any changes are made to any of these structs, you wouldn't cause cascading issues to the rest of the flags, as was the case with the raw index usage. While this is nicer to use, this isn't the only benefit. In GameMaker, it's incredibly easy to iterate through a struct. So what we can do for the save game logic is the following. We can take our struct, go through the key value pair, and since we know the depth level, we can nicely format the save file to include the chapter, the section, and the story flags. For example, here we can clearly see which flag is for Joe's sunglasses. Another huge benefit using these key values directly from the struct is, we added some freedom to make refactors and code changes possible. Since we have the struct
Basically made it easier. I mean, the old code would be a nightmare. This code, I could have basically changed it if I want, with basic knowledge.
Key inside the save file for
It was so-called made to mod. You call it nightmare.
the flag. In the future, if we wanted to change our code order of flags or add new ones, the struct of the save file wouldn't matter. We'd still be able to easily read in the right values. I think this is an important thing to care about. Since the game Heartbound is still in early access, the odds of changes occurring to the various parts of the game are high. And with this save file approach, we're basically in the clear.
He won't even watch these videos on how to change it. Maybe he actually go to the video because they're giving him all the data how to change. Problem is that people already know how bad it was.
To be as wild with our code.
It's like Final Fantasy 14. When it first came out, it was garbage because they're trying to keep Final Fantasy 11 running. After they changed everything and rebuilt it, it was better.
Changes as we want, and still ensure every player that is keeping up with the game updates is never negatively impacted by them. Also, one other minor thing, I threw in the save file or version number at the top for example. This helps ensure if we're making drastic changes between game versions, you can easily check what version of the save file you have and internally how to update it. Basically, it's just a good practice to ensure players aren't impacted by the behind the scenes work and progress on the game. With this solution done, let's now look at the code comments from the original snippet. With their structure and clarity, we can start cutting out large portions of these comments. We could keep the value conditions since that seems fine. While on the topic of comments, let's pull up some of the other snippets again. The comment frequency is way too high in Jason's code. Code should be self-documenting. Comments are perfectly fine to add if there's some special conditions or some other oddity surrounding the code usage, but some of these code comments are just worthless. For example, here he comments what the function call is going to do. There's no surrounding code inside the brackets to affect the function, and there's no parameters. If this needs a comment to understand what it's going to do, that means you should be renaming your function, not adding a comment. Also, redundancy like question asked equals 1 and set stuff is just wasting screen space. Maybe Jason was adding this for his live viewers so they would have a reference what he was coding, but leaving this in afterwards I find questionable. Moving on.
Basically, he put stuff in it was not needed. It was just to tell him what it really was.
On to the next snippet, we have another.
Means the code did not need it. Means it's bloatware. Means it's going to take power. It's going to take memory, which means your computer goes slower.
Another array to look at, where Jason is manually setting each array element to mostly the same value. First of all, manually setting every single array index for hundreds of arrays is something I've never even seen an amateur developer do. It's also problematic in a few.
That means he's below an amateur. Means me spending probably a month worth of learning how to code at my computer could do better than PirateSoftware literally can do. I could probably code better than Pirate can. My friend codes mods, actually updates mods on Java and can't read very good. Pirate can read better than him, and he can literally do better. Actually, he's learning a ton of stuff. He's changing mods. He's on a mod team trying to change stuff on it, and literally he's learning a lot. Even I can do the basics.
Few ways. Either the array should be initialized of values directly, then modified by using the
And I barely spent 3 days of learning Java.
right functions, or we should be using a for loop, iterating over the length of an existing array and
And that's not the whole entire time.
ensuring every index has a valid value if we're completely modifying it to something else. Let's make our code change first, then I'll break it down. So what I did here was I added what is called.
And I didn't even go to college. I literally had used on a cell phone and I used my computer to do all the work. It took a month to get everything lined up.
The for loop. What this loop is doing is it will start at the 0 index of our array, check to see if our current index value is less than the total number of indices in our array, then it'll execute the lines inside the brackets, in our case assign a value to the current index. Finally, it will increase our current index number and check the loop conditions again. If the condition is still true, it'll keep executing the code within the brackets until either the condition isn't true or we explicitly break out of the loop. Then after we finish with this loop, we manually assign the 2 special index cases with the.
Yeah, this is really, this is interesting. I don't know. It's like probably good because he's going so fast.
Angry road voice value. Loops are another basic concept of programming. Now, why is this better? Well, for one,
I'll absorb this today and learn it overnight, and then maybe want to learn C++ and do better than Pirate to do in like 3 weeks. If I really want to, I could learn it in 3 weeks. I was a very smart student when I was in high school. If I wanted to do pre-geometry, I passed pretty easy. I was messing around. I got A's. And I wasn't even trying. I was like one of the top ones. And I wasn't even trying.
thing, if we ever change the size of.
I can't do that now because it's been over 20 years.
the array code in the future, this code will still be safe, since the array length index will know the exact right size of the array. Also, not having to write a million lines of redundant code is nice too. Second, this is actually much safer, and it will reduce the likelihood.
And I had the basic scientific calculator.
Of runtime errors, or what you as a player would know as a game crash. So, what are runtime errors? Let's say we have another place in code trying to use the voice list, and let's say Jason thought he had 27 elements in his voice array instead of 26, and he was once again using his magic numbers to try and access index 27 of the road talk voice list. If we look at the original array list, it only goes up to array index 26. So, what happens when you try to access an index that doesn't exist? Well, the game is going to crash, that's what's going to happen. This happens because accessing an array index isn't code GameMaker can verify ahead of time. So, what happens is GameMaker will launch the game and execute the code up to that point. Once it hits the invalid index, the program will crash, since only at that point in time will it know the array index
So basically, this game is a hot garbage.
is invalid, and there's no data there to access. Using our approach and the array functions, we can guarantee the full length of the array is accounted for and has values. We could also use the array last function too for the last valid index of an array. This doesn't guarantee the right character voice or expression will be used, but I still think it's preferable to have the wrong voice sound activated while the game is playing, instead of having the game crashing and the player losing who knows how much time or progress. Again, for loops and default initialization are very beginner level concepts and near universal in all programming languages. Alright, last snippet we're going to look at for this video. Here we have a gigantic switch statement with multiple repeating cases, and the total case amount being like 1,000 cases for one possible branch path. There's a second branch path where there's like another 100 switch cases inside it too. I think Jason might be trolling us with this one. Let's start with the simple improvement.
Man, this is funny. My nephew didn't even have a computer for like a long time. He told me that he wanted a PS5. Doubtful he even known how to code. Told him to get a PC. He goes out, his father or mother, I don't know how it is, they bought him a PC. He's coding his own game in less than a year. He knows more about coding of C++ than PirateSoftware. And he's still in middle school or high school. He's still in middle school. A little kid can do more better than PirateSoftware. He's literally building his own game. And he's not that old, and he's building his own, and I mean more complicated than Pirate. It was like a type of gorilla tag game where it's 3D moving around, and he was doing it. And if Pirate tried to do it, it wouldn't even work. It would fall apart. They put better DRM in what he was doing.
Improvement for the multiple cases that are exactly the same code. Normally, when you have a constantly repeating code, you write a function to call it to reduce code duplication and to reduce the possibility of incorrectly copying code and introducing bugs into your program. So, if we create a function to reduce the amount of repetition we do, there's a lot of benefits. First, it's a lot easier to read and manage the code and the various cases. Second, it reduces the possibility of doing something incorrectly, especially when you're doing the same step hundreds of times. Again, better developer experience too. If you have common behaviors in a function, you don't need to manually type out
God sakes, a kid who's in middle school could do better than Pirate could ever do.
the steps for every common dialogue behavior. It also speeds up development. Since Heartbound is a primarily story-driven game, the more of these common functions you have, the faster you can make cutscenes and dialogue scripts. Now, how do we improve the 1000 switch case? Well, I thought about this for a while, and I think the fastest way to improve it is we take it and we throw it in the trash and never look at it again.
I agree.
I generally thought about this for quite a while. There's essentially no improving the structure. For most of these code reviews, I tried to never recommend anything too far removed from the current state of things, but this is generally such horrifically.
Gaming has came so long ways from the past. When they were originally making games for the Commodore 600 or 300, gaming wasn't like this. Today, people can develop games which are so much more superior with the same coding ability and processors and that of the Commodore 64. And all because we know how to code better than we did then.
Architected code, there's basically no real way to improve it.
And Pirate is back in the NES days. He's not in Super Nintendo. He's in the Commodore 64 days with bad code.
Without a complete rewrite of things. Generally, when working with dialogue or complex cutscenes, you'd be using a lot more things than just the raw.
And frankly, I doubtful Pirate even learned any coding even from his father, because his father was gone all day. Because I've heard a lot of times people who worked at Blizzard didn't come home for days. They would sleep on the floor because Bobby Kotick wanted his next yacht. So they were paying them McDonald's wages. It was a privilege to work for Blizzard at the time. It was a privilege, not a job. When you could work from home, it was the best thing they ever had at that time. They lost a lot of people after they had to come back. Over some people saying you had to come back, and now people have to sit on the floor again.
Raw strings themselves. An array of dialog structs for the lines would be a fairly common approach, and we could skim through a quick example. So the struct data is pretty dependent on your game and needs, but a few things are fairly common across most games, like having the line itself, the character you want to show on screen, and a dialog type. Generally, we'll have the event type dictate how to proceed. So a more simple example could be something like the following scenario. Here we have the dialog.
And for people who may skip around, please go to the description and like and subscribe him, the Slot News Network.
Array filled with structs, and each dialog line is a struct in itself.
I think that's how you say it.
And it tells us exactly what kind of dialog event it is and what choice and actions are possible for it. This reduces our switch statement to a handful of cases depending on how many event types we end up having. Secondly, it provides a very solid and reliable structure for us to use for.
Also makes it easier to edit and that in it. So basically, compacts the code, uses less power, means you're not having to run a supercomputer on a basic game. There was a game which came out a while ago. It literally took people who had decked out computers, which literally needed 64 gigabytes, massive freaking downloads, and it was a basic game. It should have been a lot smaller, a lot more compact. Because today we have all the technology, we are allowed to make it as big as we want. Now, you put that on a PlayStation 2, you're stuck with what you got. That size is how bad it was.
For all the cutscenes and dialogues within the game. Also, variables in GameMaker can point to other scripts. So let's say we needed to do something crazy that requires an escape hatch. Well, that's also incredibly simple, since in GameMaker we can set the value of the dialog struct to another script and call it with script execute. With this, we have reduced over 1,000 dialog cases into a handful that are easy to reason about and extend. Since this is a separate example, I'm not going to dive into this anymore. Okay, with all that out of the way, I think we can start closing up the code review, and I can start going over my comments. First off, yes, there's a lot more things wrong with the code I've shown from Jason that I didn't talk about. There were way too many things to nitpick, so
this video probably would take him months to make with all the problems he said. I mean, all of the problems he's not saying. It could took him 5 years to get through all the problems. No, correction, maybe a month long video. He's probably got many more to come because he's probably gonna have many. I don't know.
Try to limit my comments to the biggest issues. I also tried to avoid offering changes or advice that is too far detached from his current structure and setup. That's why I didn't run through multiple solutions. Also, I didn't talk about any actual game design patterns, since that would be another video into itself, and he wasn't actually using any inside his code. Next, during the code reviews, I wasn't explaining any special concepts or anything. All of the Boolean stuff, the for loops, the safe default initialization, using functions with.
He could have had a little bit more gap with his voice a little bit. He's cutting his voice off a little too soon.
Parameters, enums, or const stuff, all of that is literally intro level
but he's also trying to shrink it.
Program concepts. There was at no point in the code reviews where I went above a junior level developer's expected knowledge. Well, except maybe the struct iteration and the.
But man, he's making a good video.
Save file stuff. To help put this in perspective, let's pull up the Stanford CS 106A Intro to Programming course. This is a first year, first semester type of course. It's incredibly similar to the one I took during my first year of college. And let's just look at the things you learn in. Basically, everything I discussed in this video is stuff you learn in this intro level course. The fact Jason doesn't even seem to have a good understanding or.
You literally mean the first 5 weeks of college, and he's so-called a developer at this point? He would have learned. This is basic. You're looking here, June. This is, if you guys wonder, this is the This is the beginning of the year. This is the first semester. The second semester when you're gonna learn it. If the college started like in the fall, but it looks like this is knowledge you learn in the beginning month of January, and this is the first one. So why does he not know it? All code, he lied about everything and had his father try to get him in, and his father did all the coding, and they did not bother testing him. And more likely, he was just playing games the whole entire time and not actually doing anything, or just picking up garbage and telling Bobby Kotick what he wants to hear.
Or know about some of these things is just baffling. If we consider his 2002 LinkedIn start date as
because I'm doubtful he could even pass the test.
when he started learning about programming, that means as of today in 2025, he has 23 years of experience programming. Yet somehow he doesn't even seem to understand the most basic entry-level
He does not even know the first year of programming.
concepts in programming. It doesn't matter what programming languages.
The stuff he learns, I could probably learn and that was 3 days that them to learn it in the first month. Me, who's slower right now, and also playing games. If I actually really wanted to, and I was really wanting to learn it, 3 weeks, and I could be making games if I really wanted to, and without going to college. Would I ever sign up for maybe a developer? They can find a hole in the ground.
You use or learned, these concepts like loops and booleans
I would make the game instead and sell it.
are essentially universal in nearly all languages. Now, someone might argue he doesn't have 20 years of game maker experience. I don't think that's a valid argument, but let's go through it.
And then donate some of the money to charity.
But anyways, his first release game was Champions of Breakfast, and he spent roughly 8 to 9 months on it. So for Heartbound, he should have had a pretty good understanding of things. If I wasn't making this
He should have known better. It's called he didn't do any development.
video, I probably never would have touched GameMaker in my entire life. The entire time it took me to grasp the GameMaker language and write the code you saw in this video was roughly 2.5 hours. So I'm not gonna
Sorry about that. 2.5 hours to learn that. It would have took me probably 3 days because I'm slower now. And I'm also would take a lot of time to make darn sure I know what I was doing. And I have a reading disability and a writing disability.
giving Jason any passes due to a lack of experience with GameMaker. Now, I avoided trash talking his code too much during the reviews, but let me pull up that mega switch statement again. Let me also pull up some Yandere dev code. Now, I know
Instruction weak. If I really wanted to, I could learn what he just learned.
everyone trash talks Yandere dev's code, but it's easy to see
But if I was 16, still in high school, knowing how to work, do coding, yeah, it would be a day or less because I was a sponge.
how and why he made this. He had zero previous game dev experience or programming experience, and he dived headfirst into Unity. He just took the first thing
My nephew can do better. He knows what he's doing.
he learned and he ran with it for every problem. The code isn't good by any means, but you can understand
And
why.
I wouldn't even have to pay a penny for learning C++. I just need to have a basic computer and a cell phone and a speaker just to hear the sound from the cell phone. That's all I need. 2 free programs to be able to read everything, and I could do it. And the other program is common. Every Android has it. You just have to download one piece, and it's free from Google.
Why it's like that. With Jason, I'm
Just to read out the stuff.
just left so confused. Like, he's supposed to be a game dev industry veteran, and yet he's making stuff as bad as a complete amateur like Yandere dev. I also spent some time after finishing up this portion of the video thinking back.
I don't know what genre means. It's a new term I've been hearing lately. I don't know what yandere means. It's some term everyone's using in anime women lately.
Back to all the code reviews I've done in all my previous jobs. I've easily done
I will look it up after this video.
somewhere in the thousands of various code reviews, and I've reviewed code from all sorts of experience levels, from senior software architects to people having done a
Maybe it means idiot.
4-month bootcamp and having less than half a year's of experience. And yet, I don't think I've ever
Or crazy.
reviewed anyone's code that was this bad. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, but this is genuinely some of the worst code I've ever reviewed.
It sounds like someone who has no knowledge. Someone who looked up the internet. Actually, crushed it. I don't know how he could do so bad. ChatGPT can do better. But then it makes really good code. So I don't know where he got the code idea from. Really, it sounds like person coding before Elon Musk was alive and never updated.
Dude, and I didn't even explain or like dive into every possible issue.
Russian Elon Musk can do better. And he's too much busy with ketamine.
If we remember all of Jason's hacking claims, guess what? You need to know these basic programming concepts if you want to do reverse engineering or malware analysis. This is the
Yeah, if you don't know how to program a game decently, there's no way to hack a government government building. They'll hack you instead. while you try and hack in, they'll hack into your system. And then they'll have fun by rearranging all your icons and then put the adult rated stuff all over your screen and make your website into an adult rated website. That's what they did one time. One government decided to irritate the United States, and the hackers, it was over an aircraft they captured, the Chinese, I think, and websites were turned into adult rated websites shortly later. And they're busy having a war of a hacking war.
The foundation,
And they'll go to his game and make it into spaghetti sauce.
nearly everything else builds off of. Taking all that into account, I think Jason has been lying through his teeth about all his coding abilities, all his assembly stories, and just making stuff up with terms he's heard thrown around. If I was working with Jason and I saw this type of code being repeatedly submitted, I would push for him to be fired, with my state of reason being gross incompetence.
Exact same. I don't care if you're my own friend. I'll fire your ass. I don't care. You can't do this, crud. You're useless to me. I still give you stuff, but you won't get the pay. I don't care. I need a good person. I need a person to know what they're doing.